ननी जतने पालना कोरी कृष्ण बसती बसती बोली परमादर बोरी कृष्ण बसती बसती बोली परमादर बोरी गौरा महाराज सबस्ताने करल ब्राह्मण रांगे गौरा महाराज सबस्ताने करल ब्राह्मण रांगे जैसा बस्ताना हेरी बोमी प्रणयी भक्त संगे जैसा बस्ताना हेरी बोमी प्रणयी भक्त संगे मृदंग बाध्य सुनित्य मान अवसर सदा जाचे मृदंग बाध्य सुनित्य मान अवसर सदा जाचे गौर विहिता कीर्तन सुनी आनंद हृदय नाचे गौर विहिता कीर्तन सुनी आनंद हृदय नाचे युगल मूर्ति देखिय मोर परमानंद होया युगल मूर्ति देखिय मोर परमानंद होया प्रसाद सेवा कुरिते होया सकल प्रपंच जाया प्रसाद सेवा कुरिते होया सकल प्रपंच जाया यदि न गृहे भजन देखी गृहे ते गोलोक बाया यदि न गृहे भजन देखी गृहे ते गोलोक बाया चरण सिद्धू देखिया गंगा सुकन सीमा पाया। चरण सिद्धू देखिया गंगा सुकन सीमा पाया। तुलसी देखी जुराय प्राण माधव तो सनि जानी। तुलसी देखी जुराय प्राण माधव तो सनि जानी। गौर प्रिया साक सेवने जीवन सार्थक मानी। गौर प्रिया साक सेवने जीवन सार्थक मानी। भक्ति विनोद कृष्ण भजने अनुकूल पाया जा। भक्ति विनोद कृष्ण भजने अनुकूल पाया जा। प्रतिदिवासे परम सुखे स्वीकार को रोहिता। प्रतिदिवासे परम सुखे स्वीकार को रोहिता। शुद्ध भक्ता चरण रेणु भजन अनुकूला। शुद्ध भक्ता चरण रेणु भजन अनुकूला। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। We'll read the meaning of this song. Dust from the lotus feet of pure devotees conducive to devotional service. While serving to the Vaishnavas is itself the supreme perfection and the root of the tender creep of devotional love. I observe with great care the holy days like Ekadashi and Janmashtami, for they are the mother of devotion. As my dwelling place, I choose with the greatest of reverence and love the transcendental abode of Sri Krishna. All those places where my Gaurachandra traveled for pastimes, I wish visit in the company of loving devotees. My mind always begs for the opportunity to hear the music of the Mridanga. Upon hearing the kind of kirtana ordained by Lord Gaurachandra, my heart dances in ecstasy. By beholding the deity forms of the divine couple, Sri Sri Radha Krishna, I feel the greatest joy. By honoring the Lord's prasada, I conquer over all worldly illusions. Goloka Vrindana appear in my home wherever I see the worship and service of Lord Hari going on there. Upon seeing the Ganges, which is a river of nectar emanating from the lotus feet of Lord, my happiness knows no bound. The sight of the holy Tulsi tree soothes my soul, for I know she gives pleasure to Lord Krishna. By honoring Shak, a greeny leafy vegetable preparation, a dear favorite of Lord Chaitanya, I consider life worthwhile. Wherever Bhaktivinoda obtains, that is conducive for the service of Sri Krishna, he accepts every day with the greatest of joy. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jashodanandana Vraja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madan Mohan Radha Madan Mohan Radhe. Jaya Radha Madan Mohan Radha Madan Mohan Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha Jagannatha Baladeva Jaya Subhadramai. Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajakaacharya Ashtottara Shrimati His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrajakaacharya Ashtottara Shrimati His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada की अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की प्रेम से गौ श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपीनाथ श्यामकुंड राधाकुंड गिरी गोवर्धन की वृंदावन मथुरा धाम की नवदीप मायापुर धाम की जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की गंगा माई की जमुना माई की भक्ति देवी की ट्रांसेंडेंटल बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन की all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada की श्री श्री राधा मदन मोहन की जय, जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा माई की जय, गौर निताय की जय। ओम अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितमेन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरुं श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरुं वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगना रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितंश्च नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी नितिनामिनी नमस्ते सारस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणी निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणी नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमा प्रदायते Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratuše Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dhinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Shri Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktarunda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Today being Ekadasi today, we are reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. So before that, we'll recite prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritam Naranchaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudire Ashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nastiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. I seek blessing of all the devotees and especially I and my Prabhu. So that I can glorify Srila Prabhupada's pastimes. There is no difference between book Bhagavata and personal Bhagavata. So we got rare opportunity like Ekadasis to glorify the personal Bhagavata, which is our Acharya Srila Prabhupada. His divine grace Yasi Bhaktivinoda Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. So continuation of the previous reading. We are reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, volume 3, titled as Only He Could Lead Them, San Francisco and India, 1967, by Satsvarup Das Goswami. Sam, speedster, tall and slender with curly reddish golden hair, was athletic. He had trained as an Olympic skier, yet artistic. He was a writer and a wood sculptor. He had graduated from Reed College in Oregon and gone on as a Fulbright scholar to a small school in Switzerland, school college in Switzerland, where he had obtained a MA in philosophy. He was popular as Mukunda was him, the epitome of the rugged individuals. When Mukunda had visited Sam at his mountain lookout towers and told him about Swamiji and Krishna consciousness, Sam had been intrigued by the new ideas. Sam's life had nearly reached a dead end, but he had seen hope in what Mukunda and Janaki had been saying about Swamiji. After spending only a few days with Mukunda, Sam had begun eager to help him establish a temple of Krishna consciousness in San Francisco. Sam was the one who kept the local rock stars and had persuaded them to appear at the Avalon with Swami Bhaktivedanta, whom he had never met. Sam had seen Swamiji for the first time when Swamiji had arrived at the San Francisco airport. And Sam had later insisted that he had seen a flash of light come from Swamiji's body. At first, Sam had been afraid to say anything, nor had he known what to say. Prabhupada was completely new to him and seemed to elevated. But the day after the program at the Avalon, when Mukunda told Prabhupada that Sam had arranged the dance, Prabhupada sent for him to find out how much money they had made. Sitting across from Prabhupada, who sat behind his small desk, Sam informed him that they had made about $1,500 profit. Well then, Srila Prabhupada said, you will be the treasurer. Then Srila Prabhupada asked him, what is your idea of God? So Sam said, God is one. Sam replied. Prabhupada asked, what is the purpose of worshipping God? Sam replied, to become one with God. Prabhupada said here. No, Prabhupada said, you cannot become one with God. God and you are always two different individuals. But you can become one in interested with Him. And then he told Sam about Krishna. After they talked, Prabhupada said, you can come up every day and I will teach you how to do books. So Sam began meeting with Prabhupada for half an hour a day to learn bookkeeping. Sam, I had never been very good at keeping books and I really did not want to do it. But I was a good excuse to come and see Swamiji every day. He would chew me out when I would spend too much money or when I could not balance the books properly. I really loved the idea that he was so practical that he knew bookkeeping. He became so much more of a friend from the beginning rather than some idealized person from another sphere of life. I took almost all my practical questions to him. I learned to answer things for myself based on the way Swamiji always answered to do day-to-day problems. And the first thing he made me do was to get married to my girlfriend. Mukunda and his wife Janaki, whose apartment was just down the hall from Srila Prabhupada's, were the only couple Srila Prabhupada had already initiated and married. Mukunda, who often wore his stand of large red beads, lead japa beads in two loose loops around his neck, had grown long hairs and a short, thick black beard since coming to San Francisco. He had entered the summer of love, spirit of height, Ashbury, and was acquainted with many of the local figures. Although occasionally earning money as a musician, he spent most of his time promoting Prabhupada's mission, especially by meeting people to arrange gala program like the one at the Avalon. He had a leader in bringing people to assist Prabhupada. Yet, he had no permanent sense of commitment. He was helping because it was fun, having little desire to be different from his many San Francisco friends. He did not strictly follow Prabhupada's principles for regulated spiritual life. In this exchange with Srila Prabhupada, Mukunda liked to assume a posture of fraternal camaraderie rather than one of the menial servitude. And Srila Prabhupada reciprocated. Sometimes, however, Prabhupada would assert himself as a teacher. Once, when Prabhupada walked into Mukunda's apartment, he noticed a poster on the wall showing a matador with a cape and sword going after a bull. This is a horrible picture, Srila Prabhupada exclaimed. His face showing displeasure, Mukunda looked at the poster, realizing for the first time what is meant. Yes, it is a horrible, he said, and tore it off the wall. Srila Prabhupada was eager to have someone play a mridanga properly during the kirtanas, and Mukunda, a musician, was a likely candidate. Mukunda, the day the drum came, I asked Swamiji if I could learn, and he said yes. I asked him when, as he said, when do you want? When do you want? Now, I asked, he said, yes. I was a little surprised to get such a quick appointment. But I brought the drum to his room and he began to show me the basic beats. First, there was Gita ta, Gita ta, Gita ta. And then one slightly more complicated beat. Gita ta, Gita ta, Gita ta, Gita. As I began to play the beat, I kept spending it up. And he kept telling me to slow down. He spent a lot of time just showing me how to strike the heads of the drum. Then I finally began to get it a little. But he had to keep admiring me to slow down and pronounce the syllabus as I hit the drum. Gita ta. The syllabus, he said, and the drum should sound the same. I should make it sound like that and always pronounced them. I was determined and played very slowly for a long, long time. I was concentrating with great intensity. Then suddenly, I was aware of Swamiji standing motionless beside me. I did not know how long he was going to stand there without saying anything, and I became little uncomfortable. But I continued playing. When I got up the courage to look up and see his face, To my surprise, he was moving his head back and forth in a affirming way with his eyes closed. He seemed to be enjoying the lesson. This came as a complete surprise to me. Although I had taken music before and had spent many years taking piano lessons, I can never remember an instance where the teacher seemed to actually enjoying my playing. I felt very wonderful to see that here was a teacher who was so perfect, who enjoyed what he was teaching so much, not because it was his personal teaching or his personal method, but because he was witnessing Krishna's energy passing through him to a conditioned soul like myself, and he was getting great pleasure out of it. I had a deep relation that Swamiji was a real teacher, although I had no idea what a spiritual master really was. To Mukunda's wife, Janaki, Krishna consciousness meant dealing a personal way with Swamiji. As long as he was around, she was all right. She enjoyed asking him questions, serving him, and learning from him how to cook. She did not care much for studying the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, but she quickly developed an intense attraction for him. Janaki, there was a group of us sitting around Swamiji's apartment, and I asked him if he had any children. He looked at me as if I had asked something strange, and he said, "You are not my children." I said, "Well, yes." And he said, "Are you not all my children's?" And his answer was so quick that I never doubt that he seriously meant what he said. For several hours each morning, Prabhupada showed Janaki, John, and others how to cook. One day in the kitchen, he noticed a kind of berry he had never tasted, and he asked Janaki what they were. She told him, "Strawberries." He immediately popped one into his mouth, saying, "That's very tasty." And he proceeded to eat another and another, exclaiming, "Very tasty." One time, Janaki was making whipped cream when Prabhupada came into the kitchen and asked, "What's that?" She replied, "It is whipped cream." "What is whipped cream?" he asked. "It's cream," she replied. "But when you beat it, it flops up into a more solid form." Although always adamant about kitchen rules, one of the most important being that no one could eat in the kitchen, Srila Prabhupada immediately dipped his finger into the whipped cream and tasted it. "That is yogurt," he said. In a light-hearted, reprimanding way that was her pleasure, Janaki replied, "No, Swamiji, it is whipped cream." Srila Prabhupada corrected her, "No, it is yogurt." And again, he put his finger into it and tasted it, saying, "Oh, it tastes very nice." "Swamiji," Janaki accused him, you are eating in the kitchen." Srila Prabhupada merely smiled and shook his head back and forth, saying, "That is all right." Janaki, one time I told him, "Swamiji, I had the most excitement dream. We were all on the same on a planet of our own, of a very own, and everybody from Earth had come there. They had all become pure devotees, and they were all chanting. We were sitting on a very special chair high off the ground, and the whole Earth was clapping and chanting Hare Krishna." Swamiji smiled and said, "Oh, that's such a lovely dream." Bonnie MacDonald, age 19, and her boyfriend Gary McElroy, 20, had both come to the San Francisco from Austin, where they had been living together as students at the University of Texas. Bonnie was a slightly fair blonde with a sweet southern drawl. She was born and raised in Southeast Texas in a Baptist family. In high school, she had become agnostic, but later, while traveling in Europe and studying the religious art there and the architect of the great cathedrals, she had concluded that these great artists could not have been completely wrong. Gary, the son of a US Air Force officer, had been raised in Germany, Okinawa, and other places around the world before his family has settled in Texas. His dark hair and bushy brown brows gave him a scowling look, except which he smiled. He was one of the first students at the University of Texas to wear long hair and experiment with psychedelic drugs. While taking LSD together, he and Bonnie had become obsessed with the idea of going on a spiritual search. And without notifying her parents or school, they had driven to a west coast in search of someone who could teach us about spiritual life. They had spent a few frustrating months searching through spiritual books among us spiritual groups in High Ashbury. They had become vegetarians. Gary had started teaching himself to play electric guitar while Bonnie had gone to Golden Gate Park every day to perform a self-styled Hatha Yoga meditation. But gradually they had become disillusioned and had felt themselves becoming degraded from drugs. When the disciple is ready, the Guru will appear. They had ready and they had waited early for the day with their guru would come. Although Bonnie had spent most of her time in the parks of San Francisco, one day she had been looking through a table full of magazines in a High Ashbury head shop where she had found a copy of Back to Godhead, the mimeographic journal produced by Srila Prabhupada's disciple in New York. She had been practically attracted to Hayagriva's article about Swamiji. The description of Swamiji's smile, bright eyes, his pointy-toed shoes, and the thighs he said he and the things he said had given her a feeling that his, he might be a guru she had been looking for. And when she had learned about this, same Swamiji had opened an ashrama in Haight Ashbury, she had immediately started searching through the neighborhood until she had found the temple of Frederick Street. Before Bonnie and Gary met Swamiji, they had both been troubled. Gary was in anxiety about, about, the, about the threat of being drafted into the army, and both of them were disillusioned because they had not found the truth they had come to San Francisco to find. So, on meeting Srila Prabhupada in his room, they began to explain their situation. Bonnie, he was sitting in a rocking chair in his little apartment and he looked at us like we were crazy because we were and said, "You come to my class, simply come to my classes every morning and every evening and everything will be all right." That sounds to us like an unbelievable annoyance. But because we were so bewildered, we agreed to it. I told him I had traveled all over the Europe, and he said, "Oh, you have traveled so much?" And I said to him, "Yes, I have traveled so much. I have done so many things, but none of it ever made me happy." He was pleased with the statement. He said, "Yes, that is the problem." We began going to his morning lectures. For us, it was a long distance to get there at 7 in the morning. But we did it every morning with the conviction that this is what he said, and this is what he has said to do, and we were doing it. Then one day he asked us, what do you do?" When we said that formerly we had been an art students at college, he told us to paint pictures of Krishna. Shortly after that, he asked me to be initiated. John and Roger were soon initiated, receiving the names Jamuna and Gurudas. Rebol. And the very next day, they were married. At their wedding ceremony, Swamiji presided, wearing a bulky garland of leaves and rhododendron flowers. He sat on a cushion on the temple floor, surrounded by his followers and paraphernalia for the sacrificial fire. Before him was the small mount of earth where he could later build the fire. He explained the meaning of Krishna conscious marriage and how husband and wife should assist one another and serve Krishna. Keeping him in the center, Swamiji had commented that he did not like the Western women dress, and at his request, Yamuna was dressed in a sari. Although Swamiji had called for ghee, clarified butter, as one of the sacrificial ingredient, the devotees, thinking ghee too costly, had substituted melted margarine. He had called for firewood also, and the devotee had supplied him the bits of a broken orange crate. Now, with Yamuna and Gurudas seated before him on a opposite side of the mound of earth, he picked up a small piece of the splintered orange crate, dipped into what was supposed to be ghee, and held it in a candle fire to begin the fire. The splinter flamed, sputtered, and went off. He, he picked up another splinter and moistened it in the melted margarine. But when he touched it to the flame, it made the same whist sound and sputtered out. After trying unsuccessfully 4 or 5 times, Swamiji looked up and said, "This marriage will have a very slow start." Yamuna began to cry. Boni and Gary were initiated just 2 weeks after they had met Swamiji. Boni's initiated name was Govinda Das, and Boni's initiated name was Govinda Das, Dasi, and Gary's was Sundara. Although still dressed in blue jeans, even at their initiation and not professing to keep much of what was going on, they had confidence in Swamiji. They keep that their minds were still hazy from drugs. But they took their initiation seriously and became strict followers. Gaurasundara threw out whatever Marijuno he had, and he and Govindadasi began eating only foods that had offered to Lord Krishna. 2 weeks after their initiation, Swamiji conducted their marriage ceremony. On the evening of the wedding, Govindadasi father came from Texas, even though he objected to Krishna consciousness as radically un-American. Walking up to Srila Prabhupada's seat in the temple, Govindadasi father asked, why do ha have to change my daughter's name? Why does she have to have an Indian name? Prabhupada looked at him and then, with a mischievous gleam, looked at Mr. Patel, an Indian guest standing nearby with his family. "You don't like Indians?" he asked. Everyone who heard Swamiji laughed, except for Govindadasi's father, who replied, "Well, yeah, they are all right, but why does Boni have to have a different name?" "Because she has asked me to give her one," Srila Prabhupada replied. "If you love her, you will keep like what she likes. Your daughter is happy. Why do you object?" The discussion ended there, and Govindadasi's father remained civil. Later, he enjoyed taking prasadam with his daughter and son-in-law. Govindadasi, Gaurasundara and I sat about reading 3 volumes of Swamiji's Srimad Bhagavatam. And at the same time, Swamiji had told me to paint a large canvas of Radha and Krishna and a cow. So every day, for a whole day, I would paint and Gaurasundara would read out loud from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 1 volume after another. We did this continuously for 2 months. During this time, Swamiji also asked me to do a portrait of him standing before a background painting of Lord Chaitanya dancing. Swamiji wanted it so that Lord Chaitanya's foot would be touching his head. I tried. It was a pretty horrible painting, and yet he was happy with it. Prabhupada's thoughtful followers felt that some of the candidates for initiation did not intend to fulfill the exclusive lifelong commitment a disciple owes to his guru. Swamiji, they would say, some of these people come only for their initiation. We have never seen them before, and we never see them again. Srila Prabhupada replied. That was the risk he had to take. One day in the lecture in the temple, he exclaimed that although the reciters of the disciple past sins are removed at initiation, the spiritual master remains responsible until the disciple is delivered from the material world. Therefore, he said, Lord Chaitanya warned that a guru should not accept many disciples. One night in the temple during the question and answer session, a big bearded fellow raised his hand and asked Prabhupada, "Can I become initiated?" The brash public request annoyed some of the Prabhupada's followers, but Prabhupada was serene. "Yes," he replied, "but first you must answer 2 questions. Who is Krishna?" The boy thought for a moment and said, "Krishna is God." "Yes," Prabhupada replied. "And who are you?" Again the boy thought for a moment and then replied, "I am the servant of God." "Yes, very good," Prabhupada said. Yes, you can be initiated tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada knew that it would be difficult for him, Western disciples, to stick to Krishna consciousness and attain the goal of pure devotional service. All their lives, they had the worst of training, and despite their nominal Christianity and philosophical research, search, most of them knew nothing of the science of God. They did not even know that illicit sex and meat eating were wrong. Although, when he told them, they accepted what he said and they freely chanted Hare Krishna. So, how can he refuse them? So, we can end here. शिल प्रभुपाद की जय, शिल प्रभुपाद लीलामृत की जय, सत्स्वरूप दोष गोस्वामी महाराज की जय.